On the evening of September 28, Evergrande issued an announcement confirming the situation with Mr. Xu. On the 27th, it was rumored to be under house arrest, but it was unexpected that a day later, an official announcement was made, and he was subjected to mandatory measures. According to a report by First Financial, informed sources revealed that during a similar time frame, other core members of Evergrande who were taken away included Xu Jiaying's second son, Xu Tenghe, also known as Peter Xu. He had previously demanded that he must be addressed by his English name and not his Chinese name, at most being called Mr. Xu. Even his accommodation registration was in his English name. Well, now he can't register under the name Peter anymore. Others who were taken away include former Evergrande CFO Pan Darong, who was primarily responsible for Evergrande's financial operations, former chairman of Evergrande Real Estate Group, former chairman of Evergrande Property Group Zheng Litao, and Evergrande Wealth's legal representative Du Liang. This time, it's not just a minor issue, it's a big potpourri. Mr. Xu has had quite an eventful life, starting from eating rough bread in the rural areas of Taikang, Henan, to making it to university, and then rising to the position of director of a heat treatment workshop in Wugang. He sold scrap materials to benefit the workers and was stopped when investigated by superiors. He went from being a salesperson to an office manager and earned the company millions in real estate. Because of a disagreement with his boss over a monthly salary of 2,000, he founded Evergrande. After that, his life seemed like a story of a successful protagonist, with ambitions and an appetite for gambling, expanding like crazy, becoming a professor, acquiring a football team, and even venturing into water and car businesses, until his fortunes took a hit, leading to a dramatic rise and fall in his life. Indeed, his life was quite thrilling, and he named it Evergrande. However, in this world, nothing remains big forever. Mr. Xu had his plans well laid out. In the 21st century, amidst great pressure, while he was shouting slogans to deceive creditors, he had quietly divorced Ding Yumei. Evergrande was listed in Hong Kong through the red chip structure, controlled 100% by Xu Jiaying and Ding Yumei through British Virgin Islands and Cayman Islands offshore companies. Most of the dividends were obtained through the listed company and transferred overseas before and after the crisis. Through a silent divorce, the dividends ultimately ended up in Ding Yumei's pocket. How exaggerated was the dividend distribution? According to statistics from Qingyu Studio, in terms of the cumulative amount of dividends received by major shareholders, the Xu family ranked first. Since its listing in 2009, China Evergrande has cumulatively distributed dividends of 73.386 billion yuan. Xu Jiaying and his wife have consistently controlled around 70% of China Evergrande's shares, possibly taking more than 50 billion yuan, accounting for 68.54%. His son was not excluded from the arrangement. Before Xu Jiaying declared Evergrande's bankruptcy, his son received a trust fund of up to 2.3 billion yuan. This is known as Xu's second-generation wealth protection plan. So, what type of companies should we be cautious about? Those where major shareholders have an extremely high stake, the company is heavily in debt, yet it distributes dividends generously. Evergrande was not only generous with dividends, but it also had massive debts. Many people have asked how they accumulated over 2 trillion yuan in debt. When we break down the financial reports, we find three main categories. 1. Liabilities after deducting pre-received property payments, 1.7842 trillion yuan, which means contractual liabilities amounting to nearly 700 billion yuan, money owed to homeowners for undelivered properties. 2. Interest-bearing debt, 624.8 billion yuan, debt owed to financial institutions. Notably, domestic banks only lent him 300 billion yuan, and those loans were secured with collateral. 3. Other payable items, including materials and payment to suppliers, 1.0566 trillion yuan. This is the money owed to suppliers, and if we want to talk about the most pitiable party, it's the downstream suppliers and contractors who provided nearly 1 trillion yuan in advance funding. Bills payable were nearly 200 billion yuan, all borrowed from partner companies. Initially, they rushed to advance the money to get Evergrande's orders, but now they're left high and dry. From the perspective of how dire the situation is, the homeowners who purchased properties are the worst off. Many of Evergrande's properties are located in third tier, fourth tier, and even smaller cities, where the buyers are mostly from rural areas. These low-income families have invested their life savings in properties amidst the pandemic for the past 3 years, facing soaring housing prices after the redevelopment, only to find themselves unable to pay for their homes. This has ruined many families. With one hand, they pocketed dividends, with the other, they buried themselves in debt, affecting both upstream and downstream parties. Evergrande's difficulty in recovery lies here: there's too much debt, and they can't fill the gap by selling assets, homes, or cars. Despite owning a massive land bank of 2.1 billion square meters, most of it isn't prime land and is mortgaged. The equity structure is incredibly complex, and it's hard to find anyone willing to take over. Plus, they can't sell the land in so many cities. Other developers can buy new land more cheaply and conveniently. When they try to sell at a discount, it's only going to lead to a downward spiral. In this context, Jiaying and his son's fate is not just their own, but it's a warning to all developers who have relied on similar practices for years. Their ending is not so much a triumphant one as it is a warning to all developers who have relied on similar practices for years. Evergrande Wealth is a classic example of this. It was established by the Xu family in 2006, and in its early financial reports, it showed that about 28 billion yuan in new funds came from investment in wealth management products. They raised a total of about 92.1 billion yuan through wealth management product offerings. This money came from employees, their families, and property buyers who bought both homes and wealth management products, making it a big pit. Starting from the default of Evergrande Wealth, the redemption plan has changed repeatedly. It initially promised to pay 10% in the month of maturity and then 10% every 3 months. Later, it changed to pay 8,000 yuan in principal to each investor every month. In the second year, the amount was reduced to 2,000 yuan. In May of this year, the redemption plan was changed again, stating that the fund's recovery situation was not ideal, and they couldn't even pay 2,000 yuan anymore. Investors were not just angry about the changing and unfulfilled redemption plans, but also about the top executives collectively bailing out. Du Liang withdrew his investment in advance, and he even repaid the principal and interest of 23 million yuan to Ms. Ding in advance. From May to September 2021, 6 senior executives of Evergrande Wealth redeemed 12 investments in advance. It seems like they had a crystal ball and foresaw something coming. Desperate to borrow money, they didn't hesitate to secure financing, borrow from banks, trusts, homeowners, suppliers, employees, and family members, promising one thing upfront while having another plan behind the scenes. And it's not just Evergrande, many developers have been doing this for years. They would issue high-yield wealth management products, borrow everything they could, and now they're all facing the consequences. Evergrande's ending serves as a lesson for all of them. However, this doesn't mean the crisis is over. Far from it. The fallout is left to society, suppliers, employees, homeowners, and the government. This is the time when they should be accountable for the holes they've dug. Evergrande's fate lies here: too much debt, and they can't plug the gap with asset sales, home sales, or car sales. Although they have a huge land bank of 2.1 billion square meters, most of it isn't prime land and is mortgaged. The equity structure is incredibly complex, and it's hard to find anyone willing to take over. Plus, they can't sell the land in so many cities. Other developers can buy new land more cheaply and conveniently. When they try to sell at a discount, it's only going to lead to a downward spiral. In this context, Jiaying and his son's fate is not just their own, but it's a warning to all developers who have relied on similar practices for years. Their ending is not so much a triumphant one as it is a warning to all developers who have relied on similar practices for years. Developers should think twice before lying low. If you don't act honorably, someone else will make you act honorably. If you don't work hard to build houses, someone else will make you work hard to build houses.